think we got a pretty good episode.
Yeah, we have
today.
We have a really good episode today. I'm kind of excited about this one.
Yeah,
we're talking about quality of life in Canada versus other countries.
that's right. I think this one's a really emotional subject for people, and I find a lot of people making they're thinking emotionally about this issue, and it might be interfering with their kind of long-term objective of building wealth and building actual financial freedom. And I think so it's really important to kind of just step back, look at it objectively, how bad is it, and how does that actually interfere with my goal of building wealth? So I think we should, we'll get into it here. We posted one post here last week, and it's like, when you post stuff that sometimes I sometimes you just know it's like, well, this one's gonna
it's gonna stir the pot a little. But people need to know these things. Like, they're not investigating these things on their own. They just know slowly but surely that, man, things don't seem the same as before. And why is that? So let's go over the why right now.
So we get into it. Canada versus the world quality of life. Okay, so this is kind of the state of the union today. And when you look, there's several ranking agencies and like different organizations do these rankings. And like, for anybody to say that one ranking organization is the right one and the other one is the wrong one, you know what I mean?
Yeah. This
country is exactly 7th place, not 6th place. It's like, that's like, you need to understand the limitations of doing this, right? It's look at the trend lines, is the Netherlands on this list? You're starting to look right here. Is the Netherlands definitely worse than Luxembourg? I mean, it's a matter of personal perception, right? It's just, you have to understand. It's like, are these countries falling in these rankings? Are they increasing in these rankings? Mm-hmm. Who is in the top of these rankings? It's like, it's important to understand it. There's no absolutes, but this is a good way to start the discussion on it, right?
Sure.
And so we look here. Ranked number one, Luxembourg.
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 Most people didn't know Luxembourg is a country.
That's right. Most people wouldn't know Luxembourg is a country. And that's kind of a common denominator with, a lot of the countries in the top. Is like, you look at Luxembourg. I believe Luxembourg has a population of around 800,000 people.
Okay, so teeny tiny little country.
The entire country has 800,000 people, right? And so it's being ranked in terms of like, what's the overall ranking, what's the purchasing power, what's the safety, what's the healthcare, what's the cost of living, what's the property price to income ratio. That's one that makes the news a lot in Canada these days.
Mm-hmm.
What's the property price to income ratio? What's the commute time? And how bad is the pollution? Is the pollution good? Is it really bad, right? Kind of some delineations between purchasing power and cost of living. Think like cost of living. It's like, if I go to buy, I go to a restaurant in this country, how much is that going to cost? Whereas purchasing power is, what is my income? What can my income buy me on a global scale versus that income? So they might sound similar to people, and they are similar, but like, there's a bit of a delineation there too. And then I'm happy to see that property price to income ratio, which probably wasn't considered when I started looking at these like years ago, 5-10 years ago. It's like, I don't think it was the same. Like, they were just kind of a lot of the financial areas were buried into one, right? But I think it's become very significant on like, how much is the cost of the place that you're going to live in, right? Because you'll find other places in the world where there's a lot of cheap things, but the property is not one of them. and that can happen in various places in the world. So you have Luxembourg, you have Netherlands, Denmark, Oman, okay? And I would really look on that left column there, and you start to get the purchasing power, right? You start to see how highly correlated the purchasing power is into their overall rankings. It is a very heavy weighting, okay? Switzerland, I'm always like, Oman, like, people might, like, that's like the one, like, people from the Western world think that there's no one in the Eastern world that gets into these scores. It's like, Oman's I've never been to Oman, but it's, from all accounts, it's a pretty nice place to visit, right? So You start to get Switzerland. I'm always kind of fascinated by Switzerland because I've been looking at these for years, and they're always at or near the top of the list, like all the time. So it's kind of an interesting place. Plus, you got the whole Davos thing. Like, why does everyone actually go to Switzerland? What's the allure? So it's on my list of places to visit one of these days, right? So.
Yeah, it must be a nice place if all the global billionaires go and hang out there once a year to
tell us how to live.
Tell us how to live. Yeah, you shall eat bug paste. You'll rent an electric car.
Yeah, but going down the list: Finland, Iceland, Austria, Norway, Sweden, Australia. Okay, what's the common denominator in the top 10? And the common denominator in the top 10 is like, we have to be objective about this. So like in the top 10, they're all small populations, relatively small geographical areas with homogeneous populations. So that is the common denominator in that top 10, right? Even Australia, like Australia's population is significantly smaller than Canada. Let's take what it is here. Population of Australia, 26 million. You know what I mean? So they're 60% of our population, right? It's not as small as some of the other ones on that list, but it's significantly smaller than Canada. And we have to be objective that when it's a larger population and a larger landmass, and the homogenous populations with similar cultural beliefs are easier to manage. It's just an easier management project.
Yeah, okay. It's just a different assignment than having mass immigration.
Yeah, think of it as business terms. That's an important one. I want to get into that mass immigration because there's an outlier in that too. But we'll get back to that. But there's think of it in management terms. Is it easier to manage a business with 5 employees or 50? Of course, the 5 is easier to do, right? The 50, is harder to do. It's a naturally harder assignment to get. Okay, and so then I get into page 2 on this list, and this ranks 83 different countries. Page 2, the United States and Germany. So we get all the way down to, we'll get to Canada in a bit. Like, we haven't seen Canada in the top 11 here yet. We're on 11 and 12.
Yeah, and that's an interesting case as well.
Yes. But you're starting to see 11 and 12. There are 3, you see the first 3 countries on this list who have larger populations than Canada who rank above them. United States, Germany, Japan. Okay. So United States at 12, Germany at 13, Japan at 15. Okay. And then you start to get into, it's like, okay, again, the United States is ranking very high because of their purchasing power. They're still very, very reliant on the U.S. dollar. That purchasing power is still very, very high. Incomes are up in the U.S. and their dollars, it's the strongest bullshit fiat currency of the bunch, right?
All right, yeah. The best of the worst currency out there.
The best of the fake money, right?
Yeah, not quite Zimbabwe dollars, but it's the strongest of the fake money, right?
Yeah. Right. Okay. Then you get into Germany and Japan. Okay, interesting. We're going to get into those in a little more detail later, but we keep going down. You see, Estonia, Qatar, Spain. That was interesting to me that Spain was, that high at number 18. I kind of didn't really think about that, but their healthcare at a 7. Ooh. Interesting. I don't actually really know a lot about the Spanish healthcare system. Certainly not my area of expertise.
So higher is better on that particular metric?
Yeah, they're 7th in their healthcare system, according to this. According to this analysis, is the 7th best in the world.
Okay, that's pretty high.
That's kind of bumping up their score there, right? Healthcare it's one of those things where it's kind of important. When you're dying, it's like it might not matter how nice your place is, but if you die, you're not going to get to enjoy it. So healthcare is kind of important, okay? Going through it, United Arab Emirates, we're going to talk about that one in some more detail, okay? Because that one throws the monkey wrench into the homogenous population argument, okay? But we'll get into that in a bit. Okay, we keep going down. The United Kingdom, okay, at 24. Okay, look at the safety score in the United Kingdom.
Yikes.
63.
That is
63.
That's pretty telling.
It's
I
the
mean,
63rd. I mean, there's 62 other countries that are more safe than the United Kingdom, right?
places I've reconsidered going on vacation to.
Yeah. So then we get all the way down to Canada at number 30. Okay. And again, you have to take these with a grain of salt. Is Canada the 25th? Is Canada the 35th? It's like, by eye, this is pretty good. I've visited some of these places. I've spent time there. I mean, you start looking at the things. It's like, okay, purchasing power, 24th in the world. Okay, is the Canadian dollar the U.S. dollar? No, it's just not, right? You look at the income levels. Like, anybody wants to like really test the strategy and like think critically about it, just start looking at the income trajectories. We posted them. We posted them directly from. Directly from Stats Canada on our Instagram, and you can look at the incomes, how they're progressing in the U.S. versus Canada. What's the GDP per capita? How it's progressing in the U.S. versus Canada? What's the strength of our dollars? Like, this is not a surprise. Like, this is not a surprise that Canada is 24th in the world for purchasing power. Okay, safety, 52. 52. And this is the one where it's like, I feel that there's a lot of people who haven't traveled the world that much out there, and they just assume that Canada is like the safest country in the entire planet, and every other country is a significant danger if you go there.
Yeah,
right?
you go to the U.S., you're going to die immediately as soon as you land in America.
Yeah.
But look at Canada, like 52.
Yeah.
52.
I mean,
insane.
the U.S. is like 66.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
Like, it's a little more dangerous.
It's a little
right?
more dangerous, but my gosh, 52.
Yeah. So it's, is this really surprising to someone? I mean, like, people are like, show me your source. Like, I always tell people, why don't we show you the sources? Because we want you to look up different sources and think critically about it. All right. First of all, like, if you can't find this source, like, you just haven't looked. Like, you're gonna find it. It's very easy to find.
Yeah,
You're
this is
gonna
an
find
easy Google search.
similar sources, right? We want you to look at it, but like, I mean, for anybody who's lived in Canada, it's like, do you think it's safer than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago? It's like, go ride the train in the middle of the night and tell me how safe you feel, right? Like, yes.
Oh yeah, I mean, some mornings I have to take the train here to our office downtown Edmonton, and every morning there's a new crop of homeless / druggies sleeping in the shelter, in the LRT shelter.
Yeah.
Trying to keep warm and have a place to lie their heads at night. And I've seen people defecate in the train stations and so forth. It's awful. I mean, it's not a good scene. I mean, I hate when I have to take transit because it's just terrible. But
yeah,
save the planet. Take a train.
Healthcare, 30th. Okay, I like love picking on healthcare because people like have healthcare debates as if Canada and the U.S. are the only two healthcare systems in the world, and that's it. That's all we should do. It's like, oh, if you don't like our free healthcare system, join the U.S. It's like, guys, there's like 200 other countries. Maybe we should look at a couple other ones too to see who's actually functioning there. But like,
we can both say that they're both terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
right?
like, objectively, I don't think you'd find a source where it's saying that this is, Canada, the U.S. are the world leaders in healthcare. Like, that's just not happening. It doesn't matter what source you look at. It's like, you're not going to find that by any, kind of objective, reasonable source. And so when you get 30th in the world, do I think it's the healthcare system of the Democratic Republic of Congo? No. But do I think it's a world leader? It's like, no, I don't think it is. It's 30th best in the world. And like, I don't know many Canadians who's, lived a bit and who has older family members, who's had the experience of having kids and been to emergencies, who doesn't have a horror story. Like, I don't know any that don't have a horror story of the Canadian healthcare system.
Yeah. Well, put it this way, our healthcare system has degraded so much that now one of the first lines of treatment is suicide. Well, we'll kill you. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be long, painful. Like, we may cure you, we may not. So, I mean, here's an offer to kill you.
We'll give you the assisted dying. Yeah, it's not for anyone who thinks that this is a great scenario, it's like 30th in the world. Okay, that sounds pretty reasonable. I've seen some other countries. It's like I kind of get it. Right?
Well, look at Taiwan.
Yeah,
number one in healthcare in the world.
That's right.
I bet you nobody thought that was
right.
true.
And everyone's going to sit there and look at political leaders who are just having a Canada versus U.S. healthcare debate, and like how many of them are saying, "Hey, but look what they're doing in Taiwan." You know what I mean? What did they do in Spain? You know what I mean? Like, how did they rank so high? Right?
Yeah. Why don't some of these leaders in Canada go and visit Taiwan and see what they're doing with their healthcare system? Because they're not a same kind of country as us, but like you said, a homogenous population.
Yeah.
Great manufacturing, tech sector.
Yeah.
Healthy. Like, why?
Cost of living, 74th best in the world. That means there are 73 countries better than Canada in terms of cost of living. This has gotten worse. Like, come on, people, this has gotten worse in the last 10 years, right? It's been getting worse since 1971, but that's besides the point. That's every country's problem, right? But in Canada, it's been getting worse in the last 10 years, and it's been getting significantly worse in the last 5 years, right? Like, the line is like we started with 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and we ended up with $87 veggie trays, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's you go to the supermarket and they want $87 for a veggie tray. Like, yeah, that's kind of what happened, right? So cost of living 74. Property price to income ratio. I mean, everyone talks about the cost of housing in Canada. 30th in the world. 30th. There's 29 other countries who can figure out, how to have better housing than us. How to have more of affordable housing than us. Look at the U.S. 4th best in the world. Fourth best in the world, right? And so when we're running those comparisons cross-border, how much something cost in Ontario versus across the border in Michigan, you're comparing the 30th versus the 4th, right? So think of this as the Olympics. It's like we didn't qualify, and they're in the finals. Yeah. we didn't qualify, and they're in the finals. So, commute time, 36. 36 in the world is like, okay, I've been to some worse places, and I've been to, we've all been to maybe some better places, okay? And then pollution, 17. Okay, not so bad. Not so bad, right? And some people are thinking it's like, oh, okay, well, we should be number one on pollution. It's like, okay, Finland and Iceland. Like, we got more of we have more of an industrial base than Finland and Iceland, people. It's like 17's not so bad. Like, it's, not that bad, right? And so this is a good outlier of where we are. You start looking at some of the, where is it really bad? It's like Peru, Iran, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nigeria. It's like, okay, I kind of get it, right? And this list really only goes 83 deep, right? There's more countries than 83 countries, right? Okay, so that's there. We're 30th in the world, right? Okay, how does that, rather than the absolute value, I think it's really important to look at the progression, right? Because it's one study from one source. It's like, are we 30th? Are we 25th? It's like, okay, but what were we on this, this study 10 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's going to be very eye-opening for some people.
I like 10 years because I think that's one of the challenges most people have is like, I just think in short term, medium term, long term. This is kind of how I think in decisions. And, short term is like, to me, short term is anything that's going to happen in the next year. That's short term. Medium term is anything from 1 to 10 years. And 10 years, long term is 10 years or more. And that's kind of how I think about things. That's how I think about investments. That's how I think about businesses. And that might be one of my maybe strategic advantages is I'm just maybe wired a little bit differently, or most people think like short term is something that's going to happen today. And I'm just like, it's going to happen this year. It's pretty short, right?
Yeah.
10 years is maybe the onset of a long time. 1 to 10 years is kind of a medium term objective here. And that's kind of important to know because I think that's more of a reasonable projection too, because most people think that there's going to be some change of government and you're going to get a drastically different outcome right away. And that's not like, it's kind of if a new government comes in and they start making changes, it's like you're probably going to see those effects 10 years from now? And that's...
Well, I don't know. We didn't see effects 10 years after, Trudeau got in. It was almost immediately. You can see on the charts that a lot of the changes that happened was basically 2015 and starting from there, right? So there are some things that are immediate and some things that are lagging factors for sure.
Drill into some of those trajectories, right? Like you'll see, we posted in terms of like our GDP per capita, what happened in 2015. But go back and look at what happened to the price of oil, and go back and look at what happened to the Canadian dollar at that time, right? It's like, certainly, I think we're seeing the effects of the Trudeau government now. Like, I think now we're actually seeing, like, this is what happened. Like, in 2015, they came into power, and like, what's happening now is kind of a direct result. What happened in 2015 on the outset, it's like, how much is the new government in charge of that? It's like not a lot, right? And it's like now you're really seeing the effects of that, right? It's like now you start to tease out those interim effects, and that's what makes government so hard. Is these people get elected on 4-year terms, and most of the decisions, if they're good decisions, they're going to pay off in 10 years. And they might not even be around to see it, right?
If they're good decisions. Well,
if they're good decisions, right?
Shall we take a look at the 10-year span between 2014 and 2024?
Yeah, and this is like the trajectory here is like, I think this is the important part, because the absolute value is somewhat subjective, but like it's not like this this rating agency has some sort of conspiracy issue with the Canadian government, and they're trying to take down the Canadian government. They really don't.
No.
That's not what
completely
what
outside third-party stuff.
So we went from 7th overall to 30th. 7th overall to 30th. The U.S. went from 2nd overall to 12th. Okay, so we dropped 23 places, and they dropped 10. Okay, that's rather significant. Our purchasing power went from 6th to 24th. From 6th to 24th. That's a big, issue. Safety, 26 to 52. You see a bit of progression in the U.S. from 52 to 66. Healthcare, from 20th to 30th. So we were never, like, people want to kid ourselves and think that it was Canada was a world leader in healthcare 10 years ago. We were better. But we weren't on the leaderboard. We weren't in the top 10. Like that's our system has never performed like that, right? Cost of living, 50th to 74th. Okay, but interesting enough, look at the U.S., 45th to 77th, right? And that's now granted they have a better purchasing power, right? But anyone who's, say, taken their kids to Disneyland in the last, 2 or 3 years will see how much more expensive it is, right?
It's crazy.
I can remember going in 2018 or 2019 and then going last year, and it's just like same restaurants, same everything. It's just dramatically more expensive, okay? Property price to income ratio. I mean, this is the headline now. We went from 8th to 30th.
That's huge.
That is it. It's the change that people are feeling, right? Like we used to be the 8th best in the world, which is challenging for a country the size of Canada. Okay, it's challenging to be 8th best at anything, right? But when you go from 8th to 30th, it's like that's the pain point, right? And there needs to be some sort of you have to have a reasonable expectation, because you start to see the leaders on that list. It's like small landmass, small populations, homogenous population. Like, okay, we know we have these 3 challenging factors, but the U.S. has a population, 9 times as large as us, right?
Yeah, huge. And look at where they're at right now. Like they went from number 1 to 4. Yeah. So not a huge drop there, but look at what happened to Canada.
Yeah. Commute times. See, And all those people out there thought those bike lanes that they're installing aren't going to pay off. It's like we've lost pace in the entire Western world except for commute times. We're slightly better in terms of commute times than we used to be 10 years ago. It's like I'm not sure that should be the focus, but we've all made some healthy strides forward. So congratulations on those bike lanes. If you do get in a biking accident, you'll die in the emergency room, but you might be able to get there a little quicker. So we made some progress on the commute time. Pollution, 10th to 17th, 20th to 25th. Again, those are okay scores. So it's just look at the trajectory on how far we moved on some really important ones: purchasing power, healthcare, cost of living, property price to income ratio. It's those are extraordinarily important. It's now you're starting to see that, right? And I don't think that's, what you're seeing there. It's that's not any one policy in the last year. It's that's 10 years. These policies that have a significant lag. Exactly. It's that's 10 years.
A number of bad decisions after bad decision, after poor policy, after, just dragging their heels and just making stupid choices.
Yeah. And that's kind of, where we are. So let's look at some other, I keep telling people I have this fascination with Switzerland. It's interesting. I keep looking on stats on Switzerland and how their government is organized and how their taxation system works. And it's kind of interesting because it's they're always at the top of that list, right? And so as a capitalist, I'm naturally just wired as I think the taxes should be lower, right? And so then you start going out and finding examples where the taxes are lower and their quality of life is higher.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Switzerland is one of those examples, right? Whether you're looking at the top rate and they can, opt into a flat tax system, or looking at the average rate, it's objectively lower taxation in Switzerland. Okay. Anywhere you try to crunch the numbers, right? They drop from first to fifth, purchasing power from first to fourth. Safety is virtually unchanged. Healthcare, 29th to 25th, slight improvement, but I would say anything plus or minus 5 on these things is kind of you're kind of just treading water at that point. It's kind of, it's pretty subjective. What's the margin of error? Cost of living, 67 to 83. So it's an expensive place to live, right? Mm-hmm. It's attracted it might have attracted more billionaires, and that drives up the prices of things. Okay. Same with property price to income ratio. They're worse. They're kind of in the same boat as us.
They're only 1 point different than Canada at this point, right?
Call it the same, right? Yeah. Their decline was less drastic, though.
Oh, for sure.
Going from 6th to 31 versus 8th to 30th was drastically different, right? Commute time, interesting. 10 minutes to 30, or 10th in the world, to 32nd in the world, and pollution virtually unchanged, right?
Yeah. So it looks like there's more millionaires and billionaires flocking to Switzerland, or just more people visiting. I'm not sure what the answer is there for commute times.
Interesting. But I tell everyone, we really need to take with a grain of salt the countries that are dramatically smaller, with smaller populations. It's an easier managerial assignment, okay? Okay. Then we get into Germany. Bigger than Canada. This is a country that is bigger than Canada. Overall, they've dropped from 3rd to 13th. Purchasing power from 3rd to 15th. Safety, they've had trouble with safety too. That is a common denominator. Going from 8th to 40th, as opposed to our decline from 26th to 52nd. It's okay, maybe, what are these policies here in Germany that are similar to the policies in Canada?
What has changed in Germany over the last 10 years?
Yes.
I wonder what it could be.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it because it'll sound racist.
Yeah. The healthcare, 14th to 23rd. Cost of living, 48 to 66. Property price to income ratio, not quite as dramatic of a decline, but pretty, it's pretty substantial. And then the commute times, 35 to 25. They also have better bike lanes too in Germany. So congratulations on the focus on the bike lanes. It's finally paying off. You don't have anywhere to go. You don't have a job to go to, but you could theoretically go there if you had to. Okay. And pollution, again, treading water on that. And so this is where you get, I think there's some groupthink and we start comparing ourselves to only a very small set of countries, and it's just like, well, it's the same thing as what these countries is, but they're kind of all having the same result. So maybe we should, look outside of that system. So that's Germany, and a couple others that prepared on here that aren't part of the Instagram. So I'll just pull those up here. Japan. I think Japan is always that kind of, it's like that outlier because because of their debt to GDP. It's like they're rolling over that debt to GDP, but Japan's the third largest economy in the world. Massive population, and huge. It's like their ability to maintain the quality of life. It's like there's some clues there. You know what I mean? Like, will the whole thing implode because of the debt to GDP? I think that's a very legitimate concern that people have, but also they should look at what's working there too. From 12th to 15th overall. Okay.
Pretty steady.
Pretty steady, right? Lost a bit of ground on their purchasing power, and that you can see that with the, with the yen, like the decline in the yen. It's like that is pretty obvious. And the rest of it, it's like, okay, property price to income ratio, they've lost some ground there too. Okay. But the rest of it, it's like steady. Like, what can you say? It's like, it's pretty steady. Okay. So that's interesting. And I think there's some common denominators from the countries that are bigger than us that have outperformed us. Okay. And I think the common denominators, like you look at the U.S., Canada, Germany. Okay. The U.S., Germany, and Japan. Look at those. These are three countries that are much bigger than us, and they have not lost as much ground as us. Okay. They have not lost ground in our purchasing power. They haven't, right? And so it's like there's like a school of economics on thinking that you can just devalue your currency and that'll get the manufacturing hub rolling. It's like I don't see any long-term evidence. I see the short-term evidence. Maybe it's really good to get someone elected. You can drop the value of the currency and someone will open a plant there. But it's like, is that really increasing the quality of life for people that be there? As opposed to, think about what Germany, Japan, and the United States, it's like they produce high-quality goods at the top of the value chain, right? They're not producing, not focused on, producing car parts that are shipped to Detroit to for the top end of the value chain to be produced there, right? They're refining their own natural resources. Like you think of Germany, it's like luxury vehicles. They think of like Switzerland, it's like luxury gold, watches, chocolate, like high end, high end goods. It's like, it's not devaluing your currency. It's like, who devalues their currency? It's like China and Mexico.
It's like Canada.
China, like, do we want to really devalue our currency and focus on, getting a few more jobs in low quality manufacturing? It's like that doesn't seem to be a good long-term objective. It's like, the countries that are producing stuff at the top of the value chain, it's you do not want to be producing the widget. You want to be producing the Rolex where that widget is used in, right? It's like you need to go up the value chain, and when you do that, it's like you don't have to have the lowest value currency to do it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's look at Canada. Mostly what we have a economy that's built on resources, right? So our natural resources, oil, natural gas, precious metals, these types of things, softwood lumber, those are some of the major things. We do have manufacturing, lots of manufacturing and agriculture across the country, but really it's a resource-based economy. How do we make that shift from being the one that provides the raw materials to ones who is, creating the high value goods? How do we get there?
I've said, it's like, and I'm venturing off this podcast about how do you build wealth, and this is like, you're trying to play government here. I mean, the goal is to build a plan that doesn't matter who gets elected, right? But To me, I think a lot of it deals with taxation. Okay, so when people actually understand where, and I'm not talking about the tax rates. People have to get into the weeds a little more in taxation. Okay, one of the big policies that the Trump government enacted that really handed it to us is like, this is the one policy. Like, if you went it down, it's like, what did Trump do that was different? It's like everyone's going to have noise, and like, you know, they're talking about things that don't matter. He accelerated the rate that the U.S. can write off equipment for businesses. And so people think that there's some sort of magical trickle-down economic system that works. So if you get a bunch of rich people to move, we'll all get rich mowing their lawns. It's like, that's not how the economy works. It's like, what adds value is you convince a capitalist to deploy capital at one time, right? And if they know the tax rate is, say it's 28% in one jurisdiction, and it's 25% in one other jurisdiction. A lot of people think, well, it's like, well, 25 is obviously better than 28. It's like, but they don't realize that they're going to deploy $1 billion of capital, and one jurisdiction allows you to write that off immediately, and the other one allows you to write that off over time. The accelerated, ability to write off equipment makes people deploy capital. And you look at it doesn't actually change how much tax that government is going to collect. It just changes the time period which that business is going to pay it. Okay,
that's huge.
And it encourages that capital to start there, and that's a big difference, right? And, if there was one change, what could a government do? It's like, it's not the rate, it's not the headline rate that's the most important. It's like how aggressively can they write off that, the equipment that increases the productivity, right? Yeah. That would be like the one. It actually wouldn't change anything at all. It just changes the timing of tax receipts, but it massively changes business decisions, right?
Yeah. And the other thing we talked about the other day in a private conversation was access to capital. Access to capital. This is huge. I mean, it's so hard to get money for small businesses in Canada.
Harder, yeah. So that's like, we don't have a good, 50%. We used to be 53% of Canadians are employed by small businesses. Like, I'm interested to see what those updates are now, right? Because we've shown people that there's 200,000 less businesses in Canada than there was prior to 2019. So it used to be 53% of Canadians were employed by small businesses. Let's call it still 50%, but it's dramatically harder to access capital as a Canadian small business than as a U.S. small business, right? And so that's another realm. It's like, they don't need grants. You don't need to give $1 billion to Volkswagen. There's a bunch of small businesses out there that just need to be able to get a loan. 80% of them are going to pay you back with interest.
Right.
It's just, there is no, if you look at the Canada Small Business Financing Program and compare it to the U.S. Small Business Administration loans, it's like they're far superior. They can be used. The Canada Small Business Financing loan won't give you any capital really to purchase goodwill of a business. They would rather you go buy the assets from the auction house after the business goes bankrupt than buy the shares in an established business that's worked for years. Like, it's mind-boggling that's the desired rate. And I know that from bankers that have told me like how this works is like, the banks don't even want to use the Canada Small Business Financing Program because the government hasn't actually given them the guarantee that they will insure the loan if something goes wrong. They're basically saying, go through all these hoops to get a Canada Small Business Financing loan. So they make the banks, basically coordinate with the federal government on a loan by loan basis, but then they reserve the right to not guarantee it after the fact, after approving it, right? And so the banks are like, this is just basically a laborious process for not a lot of benefit, right? Think about it. It's like someone's getting mortgage insurance, but the mortgage insurance company reserves the right to pull the insurance after the fact if the person really can't make their mortgage. Like, how much was the mortgage insurance actually worth, right? Like, and so that access to capital is pretty huge, right? But I want to bring up another country, like two more countries too.
Okay.
Like two more countries on, this quality of life, like overall discussion. Okay. So this is Japan, and we've gone over 3 good examples of countries that are bigger than us. They're bigger than us, but they've done a better job at maintaining the overall quality of life. And I think the common denominator is they're producing goods and services that are further up the value chain than us. Like how they do that, it's different. But okay, I'll go through this one first. It's like, this is the UAE, because it's like, what was the one that we said they were all losing pace on? Was safety, right? They were all losing pace on safety. And what's blamed on safety a lot is immigration.
Right.
It's immigration. It's like, okay, and that might be true, but I don't think it's as simple as no immigration versus immigration. And the example is the UAE. Okay, the UAE is basically exploded onto the scene. You look at some of those other countries at the top of the list. It's like, the Netherlands. They have hundreds of years of history at this point, like, to establish themselves economically. The UAE was a barren wasteland basically 50 years ago. And now they're the 20th best place in the world to live. You go from a country that was, literally a desert 50 years ago to the 20th best place to live. Okay. And they are also the safest place to live. Right. And someone would say that, it's like, is it safe? I know it's safe. I spent a lot of time there. It's very safe. I can tell people from, like, just the stories are like, it's hard to describe as a Canadian how safe it is, and how much that feeling of safety gives you a sense of freedom. It's like, okay, they don't have they have a king. They don't have a democratic government, but, like, I can go outside my house and walk around and not worry about getting stabbed. It's like, that's kind of safe. You know what I mean? That deals with freedom too. Okay. So, like, you can take your wallet, for example, in the UAE, in a restaurant, stick it on the table with a bunch of cash in the clip. You can walk to the restroom. You could go pick up the food from, the nice buffet and come back, and it's still there. You could leave my wife could leave a luxury purse on the table. Nothing's wrong. You go to the kids, where, you're at the mall and with the kids, and, they got their iPads and stuff, and they're going on the rides and stuff, and they just leave their iPads in the stroller. You come back, they're still there. Would I ever do that at West Edmonton Mall?
No.
Never. Like, I would never. They're gone. They're gone.
Yeah.
In fact, you'd be surprised if they were still there on one ride. Like, it would be shocking if it was still there, right? And it's like, people think that, it's like not. It's just go there. It's wild how safe it is. Like, you can, we go around at night and we watch the light show on the Burj Khalifa. It's like, they have a New Year's Eve celebration downtown in Edmonton. It's like, I'm not going. It's not safe. I'm not bringing my wife and kids there. And you see drunk, unruly people, people who are clearly addicted to, on substances. Like, it's just not safe. And it's not safe, right? Where there, it is, right? It's, the number one place in the world. Someone can argue and say someone else is safer. It's like, I haven't been to all the places. Maybe it is, but the UAE is much safer than Canada. I know. I've spent a lot of time in both locations. Yeah. It's safer. I didn't need this chart to tell me it was safer, right?
So let's talk about the immigration thing, right? So there's a difference between a high-skilled immigrant coming into a country to perform a task or a job, even if it's, someone coming in to do a menial task. Maybe they're doing construction. Maybe they're doing, a server in a restaurant, a housekeeper, or whatever. The thing I think that is a big difference is we don't have a bunch of people claiming, refugee status in the UAE, and they have robust laws. Like, you mess around, you're going to find out pretty quick how things are dealt with in that country. Whereas in Canada, not meaning to be political, but seriously, we have a catch and release legal system. So somebody comes from a foreign country. Oh, I didn't know that was against the law. Oh, okay, well, you can go back out and do it again. Big difference between here and the UAE.
Yeah, like there's a number, and it's immigration is blamed categorically for safety, but it's nuanced. It's how is the immigration administered? Okay, in Canada, the government basically tells us who comes in. They can claim refugee status. They can apply as a foreign student. Companies can apply for the temporary foreign worker program. Yes, but it's kind of, in a way, it's a lot of the companies who are using the temporary foreign worker program. It's like it's ripe with fraud. Mm-hmm. It's ripe with fraud, right? Is there opportunities for skilled workers to come in? There is. It's challenging too to get a skilled worker. I work with medical clinics, and good luck getting a foreign doctor to come in. It's like you want to bring in a couple million people, but then make the rules really restrictive for the physicians that they're going to need to see. It's like, unless we were dramatically increasing the capacity of the Canadian medical schools, like how is that supposed to work, right? That's not going to work at all. But okay, so the UAE has a much higher rate of immigration than Canada. It's like 90% of the people in the UAE are immigrants. 90%. We're not talking 9%. Here we're worried if we bring in 5% in the new population. I mean, 90% of the people, it's almost unusual where you go out someday and meet an actual local Emirati. It's like everyone's an immigrant, right? And they're not bringing them from different countries that we're bringing them. You have lots of people from India. You have lots of people from the Philippines. You have lots of people from Africa, okay? You have lots of people from other Middle Eastern countries, like lots, okay? But it's the safest place in the world. It's like, why? What is the mechanism for immigration in the UAE is the businesses decide. The government has basically said, why should I try to establish who's a good candidate for immigration? If you want to come here and pay money to set up a business, you're probably not going to be, with no expectation. We're not giving you any money if it doesn't work out, right? We're not going to put up with any bullshit and panhandling unless you're just like, why would that person, I've set up a business in the UAE. I'm not going to go there and start causing chaos. It's like there's probably a 0.0% chance of me getting arrested while I'm in the UAE, right? And then I'm going to bring in my workers there. I have to pay money to get them a visa. I don't have to go in some roundabout way, in some underhanded labor market impact assessment. I pay a fair fee, and I bring in who I think is going to be productive. And the minute they are not productive, they don't go on the government system. They go home. They go home. That's just how it is. They go home. And so I bet you there's a 0.0% chance that the accountants that I'm going to bring into the UAE are going to commit any crimes. It's like the government has made money off of the immigration system. So not only did you bring in high quality people, it's not the countries. There's a lot of low quality people in Canada. It's like, if we could export, all the criminals from our prison system to a specific country, that might be helpful for, morally correct. I don't know, but it might be helpful for our scores on some of these lists, right? But there's a lot of, in any country, even the best countries in the world, there's people who you don't want coming to your country. And then there's people in the poorest countries in the world who are the leaders, right? And just think about the mindset of someone who goes. It's like, the person who goes to a different country with no job available to them probably is not in the top echelon of that country. Like they're just not, right? The person, they're just like, I got nothing else better going on. Maybe it gets better there. And I heard they might give me some free stuff.
Free stuff.
Like that's
people love free stuff.
And so people think it's easy to immigrate. Everyone's like, stop immigration. It's like, okay, you want to stop immigration, but you better be thinking about stopping CPP at the same time too, because that system's going to become insolvent if you don't have
Ponzi plan.
If you don't have new workers enter into that system, okay? It only works because you need more new people to come into it. We've broken down went through the economics of that before, right? And so I don't think people have thought it through. It's just what's the quality? It's like the Canadian government should be using the immigration system as a profit center and letting the businesses determine who are the productive people to bring into the economy. It works. And so people want to say it's like immigration leads to crime. It's like, bad immigration leads to crime. The country with the biggest amount of immigrants in the entire world. I bet you the UAE has the highest immigrant population in the entire world, and it is the safest country in the world. So it just kind of obliterates everyone's perception on immigration. And it's like if you let the bottom tier from any country come in, if we let the worst Americans come to Canada, we would become less safe. Right?
Yeah.
That's just, you let the worst people from the UK come to Canada, we would become less safe. That's just how it is, right? But businesses, I'm not going to go and pay a sizable fee to get a work visa for an employee who I think might cause problems. Of course I've vetted them. This is kind of how this thing works, right? And so I think that's a very important part of it to people to grasp is like immigration is, unless people start magically having more babies tomorrow, you're going to have to deal with immigration. So you might want to get better at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people can agree. There's not a problem with the immigration. It's the quality of the candidates.
Yeah.
And productivity.
And I want to go through one last one, and
Sure.
This is the Philippines. I spend a lot of time out there because we have our office out there. It's like that's how we we have our head office in Edmonton, and we have our satellite office in Vancouver, and then we have our back office in the Philippines. I recruit people from the Philippines and bring them to the UAE. Like that's the process. Like the UAE is not a great place to recruit people because the people who are there generally have money. So you got to find good people from other countries, pay your fee, get them there, and it's a win-win for everybody because they get access to a tier 1 country. But this is and so I'm using the Philippines, but you could probably use a lot of let's call it the third world countries, right? And I would say it's like there's a whole pile of countries around the world have a GDP per capita less than 10,000 a person. Okay, put them in one list. It's like the Philippines is like 5,000 per person. It's like where are we? It's like they're the 76th best country in the world. Okay, the 76th. Okay, so it's not Sri Lanka or Bangladesh.
It's not far off.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of countries. It's like call it like the DRC or something like that. So they're not even going to rank on the list. How do you separate how do you separate one war-torn country from another? Like it's like bad. At some point, bad is just bad, and trying to rank them is kind of silly, right? Okay, so they're 76. Their purchasing power is 75th. Okay, I mean that's the main thing. It's like the people there. It's like they're kind of economic prisoners. It's like their access to any decent, their wages are low. Their access to any decent assets are low. Okay, you're buying assets that are denominated in Philippine pesos. Like that's the challenge, right? Safety, the same. Let's call it the same. I mean, they're 4 points better. It's the same. It's like, can I tell you that? Yeah, it's the same. I've been there. It's like there's places I'm not going to walk around in the Philippines, and there's places I'm not going to walk around here. It's like it's the same. It's like I would say like by eye the petty crime is higher, the violent crime might be lower. That might be a real thing. You don't have the same especially in the nicer areas, you just don't have like flagrant drug use everywhere. Like that is policed a little better. Healthcare, worse. Cost of living, better, dramatically better. Yes, because you can purchase the access to labor there. It's like you're not gonna have like the crazy restaurant prices. You can go and buy physical goods very, very inexpensively there. That's a real thing. But how about a nice place to live? Dramatically worse. It's like you can go buy a nice condo in BGC, for example, and it's probably the same price as a condo that you'd pay in like Edmonton or Calgary for a condo, but the people don't make as much money there, and so you get that large disparity that like rich people are going to buy high-end property, and it's really going to skew that average. Commute time, it's like 70th. It's like bad, really bad. It's like comically bad. They have no bike lanes there. Pedestrians are taking their life in their hands every time they cross the street. Motorcycles going in and out of traffic. It's just like it's so bad. The only thing to do about it is laugh about it because it's atrociously bad. But that being said, you want to live in a nice walkable neighborhood like BGC. You buy your nice condo. You can walk over to I can walk from the Fairmont Macadie to our office in BGC. It's like, it's a nice walk. It's a decent walk. There's one road where I have to cross where it's like a little bit dicey. I could stay in another hotel in BGC and I wouldn't have to do that, but that's where I want to stay. Pollution, terrible. Oh, it's awful. And so it's like when I go to the U.S. and like maybe the U.S. is slightly more polluted than Canada, like, do I really notice it? Maybe if you're in like downtown LA or something like that, you get the real smog happening. But like when I go to Manila, it's like, oh yeah. It's like I can't verify if Canada is 17th or 6, versus 66, but I can tell you the pollution is way worse in the Philippines, like way worse, right? And so I think a lot of people, you need to focus here on this purchasing power, okay? So here's your purchasing power because Canadians are having emotional reactions to this, right? And I think it really triggered it in COVID. They got their freedoms taken away and they're just like, some other country must be better. It's like, a lot of them had crazy COVID restrictions, right? What is not going to give you freedom is moving your life from Canada to Philippines or Mexico and opening a business in the Philippines or Mexico and trying to generate, income in that foreign currency. It's like, that is a bad idea. That is not going to give you the financial freedom, right? And a lot of people think that they have to have housing. They have to have physical housing in the jurisdiction that they want to. It's like, you need liquid assets. Liquid assets are more freedom than houses in a jurisdiction. So think like you have one person, and this, one person, they have one house in Canada and one house in Mexico. It's like, okay, I got my freedom. I got my plan B. But they got no liquid assets. And then there's some sort of like, monkeypox 2.0 lockdown that comes out, and let's just say who's ever in charge at Mexico that time just goes full authoritarian, right? And another person just has their house in Canada, but they got $1 million in dividend-paying stocks that pay them every month. One of them can get on a plane, go wherever they want, and live however they want, and the other one is tied to that physical asset that may or may not be, that useful, right? And so 24th in the world, pretty good. Let's call it 200 countries in the world. Like we're almost in the top 10% in purchasing power, right? And so you have to think long and hard could we do better in the next election? Hopefully. Have we had enough of this? Have we seen enough proof of work now that we're okay with that? Or do we need another 4 years? Maybe they need another 4 years of pain, right? But if Trudeau was in power for another 4 years, are we going from 30th to 76? No, we're not going from 30th. Could we go from 30th to 4th? Maybe. We could go from 30. But are we going to have purchasing power of 7? No, we're not going to have that. It's like, we're 24th in the world. Okay. So it's like, what are you doing with that purchasing power? Are you giving yourself and your family financial freedom? If all you're doing is buying real estate in 1 or 2 countries, that's not a lot of freedom. That's just not a lot of financial freedom, right? And, I'm a big proponent of like, you should not have a zero allocation to gold or Bitcoin. Like, you should not have a zero allocation to gold or Bitcoin because those are true international assets. The price of gold does not care, if Trump or Harris is going to win. They do not care if Poilievre or Trudeau gets elected. It's like the price of gold just does not care about that. Central banks around the world are buying gold. It's going to continue to drive it up, and they're all printing currency. It's like, okay, so I have some gold. It's not as portable as my Bitcoin. I have to understand that, right? I might not be able to, that might not be my exit plan asset, but it's very uncorrelated to the other assets that I own in the country. And so, like, if people are trying to set up their, generate freedom for themselves in their country, they have to realize that any one country can go rogue at any given time. And there's not a lot that you can do about it, right? But those that have liquid assets have a lot more freedom than those who only have illiquid assets. You could be worth $3 million, but your $3 million is tied up in one piece of real estate in Kitsilano. how free are you? How free are you? Can you sell it? When the COVID lockdowns occur, could you have sold it? No, the prices of real estate tanked. Everything tanked simultaneously. Eventually, they went up, and they went up significantly more, but they had no freedom. That wasn't freedom. It's like, so if you have the ability, you have a high, where is your highest income right now today? Where is your network? People always want to start from one jurisdiction and they go to another jurisdiction. And maybe if you're starting out, you have nothing. Okay. And maybe, I understand the professionals and they're 25 years old. They have no network. They're really at the beginning and they take their first job in the US. I get it. The purchasing power is more. I totally get it. But you have an established business, an established network in this jurisdiction, and it's the 24th in the world. It's like, there's a degree of you're likely taking a step backwards there, and just because you've set up your base in one jurisdiction does not mean that jurisdiction's going to be good forever. It's like, where are you actually going to derive some income that's not related to your physical presence? I mean, think you could have a business in Canada if you could operate it remotely. You could be wherever you want. It's like the 24th best purchasing power in the world. You can get on a plane anywhere, right? Yeah. If you have a high income job here, it's like, are you really more free if you take a lower income job in Mexico? You know what I mean? If you take the work from home job in Mexico, I caution everyone about those work from home jobs. I told everyone during COVID, and you're starting to see it. It's like, if you can work from home, that also means that they can hire someone in a different country who makes way less than you to do that job too. They just haven't figured it out yet, right? And people are starting to see that. And so we need to think really critically on where we are, where we've been. It's concerning. We've gone from 7th to 30th. But in my mind, if you're trying to build, financial freedom for your family, it's like, first of all, it's like you could create a good life for your family in the Philippines. It's like there's a way to arbitrage this, and I'm not just saying just the Philippines. It's like any of these countries that have a very low cost of living. It's like BGC in the Philippines is better than Abbotsfield and Edmonton. It just is. It's a better neighborhood. It's like anywhere in the world you go to, if you have, I shouldn't say anywhere, most of the world you go to, if you have money, there are nice places to live and hang out. There are nice places to live and hang out. If you don't have money, most places in the world suck.
Right.
That's kind of like.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. So the goal is to get some liquid assets, get something that's paying you, so that in the event things go sideways for here in Canada, you have a place to go and you can actually enjoy yourself in another jurisdiction while your business is still running, or your assets are continuing to grow.
That is the goal, right? Just hitching your wagon to another country and hoping that's the one. It's like, that's not actually the goal. It's like, you want to be in a position where it does not matter what government A or government B does. It's like, you can maintain a high quality of life for your family. And so taking an established business or an established job and going to a different jurisdiction and starting all over. Starting all over. And it's like, if you don't have a job and you're taking the first job in the U.S., but you're leaving your established job in Canada for a new job in the U.S., you're a probationary employee. They might turf you in a month. That is a real thing. You have an established business here in Canada, and it makes $200,000 a year. It's like, you're gonna go start it all over again in a new, where you have no network, no reputation. It's like, have you really moved up? You move backwards in your life. It's like, and now you've hitched your wagon to who? Kamala Harris, right? I still haven't even Donald Trump. Man, I heard he's I heard he's launching the new. A new crypto coin. Oh my goodness, I really hope that's not true. I haven't dug into it yet. I've seen the headlines.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Is it an exchange, or is this...
I know he was at the Bitcoin conference and he said some good things there.
Yeah, do we need one more crazy altcoin? Come on. Governments are going to do crazy things because their backs are against the wall, and they're elected on 4-year terms. And I really don't think the steps that are really necessary to increase that. It's a 10-year project, and no one has enough, kind kind of enough voting clout to get there. So it's an incredibly difficult assignment for really anybody to, to critically change that. And so I think we're going to see a lot of volatility, a lot of crazy things over this next cycle, because, we kind of entered into a new monetary cycle in 1971, and, economic cycles take about 100 years, and we're halfway through, and now we're on the decline. And I think everyone can kind of see that we're on the decline of this thing. And so, set your family up. Don't go from a place where you have a high income stream to no income stream. Okay. The goal is to acquire, you can have some assets, like having real estate in Canada is great. It's an established real estate market, but like, I don't want all my net worth tied up in real estate.
No.
And particularly, if I want to leave, can I rent that real estate? Or is this just real estate that's only worth it? It's very specific to me, and I like that exact countertop and, that exact design plan. Is like, how rentable is it if I want to leave? Like, that's the goal. That's what's really going to increase the quality of life, not hoping for an election to turn the scale. It's like, how do you put yourself in a position that you could have a high quality life? Because sometimes taking your modest earnings in Canada and living somewhere else in the world that has a better, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes you want to set up a base in a Philippines or a cheaper location because your dollar's just going to go further. You want to go, remember we went to the US, it's like the cost of living was worse in the US on this comparison. It's worse than in Canada, right? And so you have to go pretty far up the income stream in order for that move to make sense. And so I hope that's helpful for someone. I hope it gives someone some guidance. It's like you don't need a particular result in an election to do this. You don't need to just dramatically move you and your family to create that financial freedom and to create a higher quality of life. The rankings tell you one thing, but how you live in that country is kind of dependent on you at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing with us today. Again, if you are interested in visiting our business bootcamp, our Beat the Odds at Money and Wealth in Canada bootcamp, it's at West Edmonton Mall here in Edmonton. We only have a few tickets left. Like, they're going very fast. Go to spurrell.ca, SPURRELL.ca, and check it out. Get your tickets today, and we will see you in November.